Welcome to the Sound Bytes podcast. My name is Nick Martin, and today we will talk with Jeff Tunn, who wears many hats, including best-selling author, speaker, and technology leader. His work has been featured in Forbes, Huffington Post, among others. We'll tackle conversations around work from home and what it means for organizations today. What should remote work look like? Is it helpful for businesses to offer this, or is it detrimental? We'll also discuss technology road mapping. This is a broad topic made clear by Jeff as he gives advice on how organizations should be road mapping, utilizing technology, making it a part of their plans. All of this and more as Jeff and I discuss technology and the biggest factor of all when it comes to adopting digital transformation: people. Sit back and enjoy the conversation. Let's get started. All right, Jeff, welcome to the show. Great to have you here.
Awesome. Nick, thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to sit down and chat with you and chat with your listeners. A little bit about my background. I've been in information technology for about 40 years, so long time. I think we started on an abacus when I first got into IT.
Nice touch.
But I came up through the software development side. I was a programmer, a developer, fell in love with solving problems through code, talking to someone in a business role about a challenge they were having and being able to bring them back a solution that helped solve their problem. Over the years, I worked myself through the management ranks, global organization at one point, and spending a lot of time on airplanes because it was a global organization, but eventually worked my way into the CIO ranks and spent about 10 years as CIO for a couple of organizations here in central Indiana, where I'm from, and just had a great experience in both of those, doing what we would probably call today digital transformation, although that's not really a thing 7 or 8 years ago when we were doing those kinds of things. But at one point, I decided I wanted to try something new. So I moved to the dark side, became a vendor, moved to the other side of the desk, and I became a product executive for an IT services company, helping to productize the services that we would provide to the market, always trying to provide the voice of the CIO. We speak different languages sometimes on either side of the desk, and what resonates with an MSP from language perspective may not resonate with the CIO and vice versa. So helping to bridge that understanding between the two. And I did that for, 5 or 6 years anyway, and decided about 2.5 years ago to leave the corporate world and go out on my own. I had written a book called Amplify Your Value, Leading IT with Strategic Vision. And so based on that book and then a subsequent different book on job search, I launched this company. And our focus is changing the face of IT. And what I mean by that is really multifaceted, and we can dig into this, but the basic premise is that many of us got to positions of leadership because we were good technologists, not necessarily good leaders, and helping to understand what those leadership skills are, helping to teach those leadership skills, and helping people to grow and be able to be more effective in their careers because they have those skills. And I've been doing this now for about 2.5 years.
Okay. So you talked about leadership skills being taught. So you believe this is a teachable skill that people can really pick up?
Absolutely. Yes. Do I think people have some innate traits that maybe lend themselves more to leadership roles?
Sure.
Yeah, probably. But I also believe that most of these skills can be taught. It's things like a deeper business acumen. And a lot of times we talk about business, we talk about the P&L and the balance sheet and that, but really getting involved in whatever business you happen to be in and understanding how the business makes money, what problems they solve for their customers, and what is the buying motion that their customers go through. All of these things are so important to the technologists as they're trying to help the business grow and thrive. But it also goes beyond that to things like communication, collaboration, a couple of things that aren't always in our stereotypical view of the IT professional, system thinking, design thinking, the maniacal focus on the customer and what that means for a business from its technology perspective. And then the other aspect that I spend a lot of time talking about is diversity. diversity in technology roles is still, we've been talking about it for a long time, and the numbers are still pretty bad. When you think about women in technology related roles, there's about 23, 24%, depending on what survey you look at. As you get into the leadership ranks, those numbers drop dramatically. You look at African American in tech, there's about 8%. Latino is about 5 or 6%. None of those really line up with our demographic in our country, in our world, and trying to bring those into IT, because I think a lot of these problems that business is trying to solve today are so complex. You need that diversity of thought, experience, background, and culture to be able to solve them. So that's really what I've been doing for the last 2.5 years in a wide variety of ways.
It's definitely, this is not an issue that won't go away overnight, for sure. You're talking about deep, complex issues. I guess my quick question would, on that note, you had mentioned, have those numbers changed at all in the past 10 years? You talked about percentages there. Have they changed, or have they not significantly?
I would say they have not changed significantly.
Okay.
We were seeing a bump in some of the numbers pre-pandemic. Pandemic, we lost more of our female colleagues than as a percentage than we did male colleagues for probably a wide variety of reasons. Yeah. But it put us back to where we've been. I think what I'm encouraged by, though, is we're seeing this newfound realization that we need to do better by our marginalized colleagues and bring them in and create environments that are not only diverse, but inclusive, making sure that everybody has a voice. And that's really, it's going to solve a lot of things. But one of the things that we run into is we all have biases. It's just part of the human brain. It's the way our brain works, is we shortcut things in our brain. And understanding, sometimes we don't see our biases, but if we have this diverse team attacking a problem, we begin to take the biases out of the technology. I mentioned I started life as a programmer. And so when I write code, or used to write code, some of my assumptions get built into the code. And the same thing happens today. I forget the exact number, but things like voice recognition. A male voice is more recognizable to these natural language processors than a female voice. And there's studies that show the different percentages of that. And so that's because it was probably designed and written by a guy. And so when you're doing your testing, you're testing with male voices, not a diverse set of voices. That's just a small example.
Yeah. But you take that out across the 100,000 variables out there. That could, it really sways the market then. It really does.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So on that note, we're talking about people and aligning ourselves with diversity. How are the impacts, and I'm going to switch gears here to remote work. As we look at Apple, so Apple just clarified to their employees that they're going to require people to come in 3 days a week, and versus this whole remote work full time, and they can pick and choose when their other 2 days are. So how is that comparing to this whole idea of diversity, relating with people? If a big corporation like Apple is doing it, that doesn't necessarily mean it's the correct move. It just means we have a major player in the market doing this, so people will probably follow suit. So what's your take on that? What's your take on life after COVID, this whole idea of remote work? Is Apple making the correct move? Yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
That is such a great question, Nick, because I tell you, it's one of the most frequent conversations that I have with technology leaders across the board. And I've got a client that is a large global manufacturer, and they are very adamant. You have to be in the office, and it's a 5-day a week in the office because, gosh, we're a manufacturer and the people on the shop floor have to be in, so you have to be in. The fact is they're going to lose a lot of people by doing that. And you mentioned Apple saying 3 days a week in the office and you can pick the other 2 days a week. I think that's probably getting closer. In my mind, it's about flexibility, that we're no longer, if we ever really were, we're no longer an 8 to 5 world. And I know some developers that write their best code at 2 o'clock and knock yourself out, man. Yeah, that is not me. I'm asleep. Sure. But if you're writing code at 2 o'clock in the morning and it's good code, I'm not going to want you to come into the office at 8 the next morning. Those requirements, to me, it's the flexibility. And that also starts to, one of the other things that came out of the pandemic is when people went home, they found this new relationship with their own families, that they were able to be more involved in their kids' lives because it's all happening right there. They no longer had the half hour to 2 hour commute in the morning and at night. And so they had more time in the day. And that lends itself again to this concept of flex. If I can be flexible and pick when I'm going to be in the office, and maybe it's not even an entire day. Maybe I come in, maybe I'm a morning person in the office and I come in 5 mornings a week, but I go home in the afternoon. Yeah. I think those are the kinds of schedules that we're going to start seeing, is that blended, hybrid, flexible schedule, because I think that's what the professional wants. Now, there are some roles like a developer. A developer can sit anywhere and write code. It remains to be seen whether they can truly understand the business need and the customer need when they're not there acting with their coworkers or interacting with the customers. So I think we have to build those pieces in.
Sure. Okay. So that's an interesting point. So which brings along the conversation of a CIO's role in all this decision making, because what you're talking about is technology impacting a company at an incredible level. This idea of remote work all of a sudden could make or break the HR departments of like recruiting new people and talented people. And so how does a CIO sit at the executive table today and help make those decisions? How are they leveraging this, or are the executive teams welcoming this kind of thing, or are we still being taught how to make the shift here?
I think the answer to that is it depends, right? Some companies, some executive teams are going to be open to that, where the CIO has a voice and can bring his or her voice to this. What people, a lot of times we talk about what he's different, right? Going back to my example of the manufacturer, I don't need to be in the office to do my work. Very seldom do you have to go touch a piece of technology. Yeah. There are some things that, yes, you do have to go to be able to touch. But for the most part, most of IT doesn't have to be sitting there to do the work that they're doing. You also have to be a part of the entire organization. You can't just say, he's different, we're going to do it this way. You could probably make the case that HR could do a lot of their work from home, especially talent acquisition, that piece of HR. So I think it's got to be a conversation at the executive level of what are the key values that our company has, and what are the key skills that we need, and how do we attract those skills to our company using our values? And dictating that, hey, you've got to be in 5 days a week probably isn't going to attract the type of talent that you want and need. It will attract some, but it may not attract the best of the best. So I think the role of the CIO is to a couple of things, right? Because we do represent technology. That is our job within the organization, is to bring the knowledge of the technology that can be used to provide the experience or near experience of being in the office. It's like you and I today, Nick, we're on video. We can see each other, have that conversation. That goes a long way to building those kinds of relationships, because you can see each other, but it's not like being face to face. I hate to say never, it never will be, because tomorrow someone is going to release the hologram, video call for hologram.
I never know what's around the corner.
And prove me wrong. But I think the CIO has two perspectives. They have to sit as an executive, your first team is that executive team. So you have to make decisions that are the best decisions for that first team, for that company, and then talk about your team. But so you have to, first of all, represent that, but then you also are representing, here's what technology can do, here's where it will play a role, here's some of the things that we can bring to the table to help with this, and get out of some of this synchronous world where we have to be all in the same meeting all at the same time, all day, every day.
So how, if a business leader, an executive is listening to this and you're saying, okay, so there is something to be said about losing value face to face. What is one or two practical ways to help overcome that? Is it just by doing more video chats? Is it by asking them to come out once a week, or like, how are executives supposed to, because there is a balance, like you said there. I mean, you don't want to push people, but are there any practical ways, or is that really the challenge today?
I think you have to build in some level of face-to-face, and depending on how distributed your company is, that may be once or twice a year, you're bringing people together to meet each other, to break bread together and build those kinds of relationships. First of all, you've got to build that in somehow. And if you're less distributed, maybe you're doing that more often. That's thing number one. And thing number two, I think, as the executive, one of the things that executives miss with the whole pandemic thing is the ability to walk around and talk to people. Executives that I talk to talk about stopping by someone's desk and having a conversation, or running into them in the break room and saying, "Hey, Nick, how was your weekend?" kind of thing. And you don't get that in this distributed world because everything's so formal. For you and I to have a conversation, I got to schedule a video call with you. I'm not just going to all of a sudden ping you on a video call, probably.
Yeah.
And it makes it takes some of that informality out of the relationship and makes it a little more formal. So we've got to fight that. And a couple of ways that you can do that is the way we started our conversation today, Nick, is just a little bit of get to know you. Yeah. How was your weekend? What did you do over the weekend? What's the weather like in your part of the world? Whatever it is, make sure that you build that into some of the conversations so that you start to get some of that. How was your son's baseball game Friday? I know he was looking forward to the game. How did it go? Yeah. Kind of thing.
And so you're talking about building a little bit of informality and intentionality into kind of how we're connecting with people. So, hey, when we get to meeting, it might not be all business. We might, hey, let's just spend a couple minutes connecting the dots together and spending time.
I love the way you said that, the intentionality of being informal. It's like an oxymoron, but you're right. You have to be intentional about being informal.
Wow. Yeah. So human connections, they're not made by meeting rooms. And so what we need to do then is essentially create a little virtual break room working.
Yeah.
Oh, this is fantastic.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember now what company it was, but they had a video channel that was always open in the break room. Oh. So whoever's walking by the break room, you're looking to see who's on the video. If there's anybody there, you can chat, or you can see. And that gets a little Big Brother-ish, maybe. Yeah, maybe. Checking out the break room. But people are trying different ideas to try to bring the office experience to the remote world.
That's actually a really cool, unique, creative idea. What we need to be more of today is creative. It sounds like we need to be a lot more creative, think outside the box. I don't know, the technology people are great at doing that, but it's a work in progress.
I think being in technology is a very creative type role. We may not, I always joke with my friends in marketing, we may not always play with crayons and scissors, but we are creative. And to all your listeners who are in marketing, I hope I just didn't offend you, because I do love marketing professionals. Yeah. I think we're more like than we are different. When at one point in my career, I was CIO, but our CEO decided to combine marketing and IT under me. So I served as CIO and CMO at the same time. And I was stunned at how similar we were and how similar our jobs were.
Oh, that's interesting.
In a lot of respects. And so have a utmost respect for the marketing professionals.
Yeah, no doubt. We all have our roles and they're all hard jobs.
That's right.
Might not always feel that way when you're in the midst of it, but it's true.
Yeah.
Okay. One of the final subjects I'd love to bring up is think about technology road mapping. This is something that in our company that we're trying to do with our customers. We're trying to help them come up with a roadmap. And this roadmap, more often than not, ends up, we talk with executives, we talk with decision makers, if they're not executives or decision makers. And more often than not, we end up talking about people. What are some keys to success as companies think about their technology roadmap? Because there's a lot of companies out there that don't even have one. How do they develop one? How do they add this to their yearly, quarterly breakdown? How should they be building this out?
Wow. Yeah. The technology roadmap really is a business roadmap, right? It has to start there. And hopefully the business has a strategic plan or some plan for where the business itself is going. And then the technology roadmap can be, if the business is going there, how do we make sure the technology is ready? What it really comes down to is somewhere in the organization, you have to have some visionary leadership. And to me, visionary leadership, the one trait that sets a visionary leader apart from other types of leaders is this ability to stand in the future and see what things are going to be like in the future. And that sounds a little nebulous, but literally, if you can say, okay, 5 years from now, 2027, what are things going to be like in the industry that my company operates in my company itself? You begin to paint this picture of what that looks like. And then you know where you are, right? 2022, this is what we have. You begin to connect the dots from the future back to today, and that becomes your roadmap. You put together the things that says, okay, if this is what we're trying to build in 5 years, then before that, we need to do this. And before we do this, we need to do that. And pretty soon you now have your roadmap of how to build that. But your point, the people side of it is absolutely true, is as you're thinking about this future, what skills do we need to achieve that? And how do we start building those skills today in our people so that we're ready and they're ready? Because one of the things that we have to do as leaders is we've got to paint this picture for our teams that is so vivid and so compelling, they can see themselves in that future. Because if they don't, they'll leave. If they don't see themselves 5 years down the road working for ABC Corporation because you didn't paint a picture of what their job is going to look like then, or what their career is going to look like then, they'll go elsewhere to find it. So we have to be able to describe that future so vividly that all of our teams can see themselves in that role. And then it begins, you start putting together a development for your employees. A lot of times we wait until an employee is in trouble. And I know I just used air quotes on an audio podcast, but for your audience, picture some air quotes. We wait until the employee gets in trouble before we put them on a development plan. Why is that? Everybody needs to grow. One of the reasons people get involved in technology in itself is because they're naturally curious and they love to learn. So why not put people on a development plan from day one? These are the skills that I need to bring my vision to fruition. So if these are the skills I need, who on my team has them today, or who on my team can develop them and be ready when I need them?
Wow. I mean, if there's a word that's popping out in our conversation together, it seems like the people just need to be a little bit more intentional. Apparently there's a lot of corporations, a lot of businesses, organizations flying by the seat of their pants, making decisions, because this takes a lot of thought. This is going to take a lot of intentionality on leaders and for them to think things through properly.
Yes. Absolutely. And so many aspects of it. And when you start thinking about the people aspects of it, people are complex. This technology stuff's pretty easy in comparison.
Ain't that the truth? That's a fair word. Hey, I'd like to invite you to the final word. Anything you're passionate about. As we discussed a lot of different topics, maybe there's something out there that we didn't cover that you're like, hey, this is worthy of a final word or a final discussion point. I did want to invite you to that if there's anything out there.
I think we've touched on this a little bit, but I can't emphasize enough that for the technology professional today, whether you're a practitioner or whether you are in an MSP, it's this focus on the customer experience, customer engagement, but then married very closely to that is the employee experience and employee engagement, because those two have to go together. And we talk a lot in our space about digital transformation. And to me, that it's really a mindset about being intentional, to use our word again, and to be intentional and focus on how does the customer interact with my business and how can I make that a better experience for them? How do my employees interact with my business and how can I make that a better experience for them? To me, that's the transformation.
Wow. That is an excellent final word. I just really want to thank you so much for taking the time to be with me this morning. And I'll make sure that anybody listening has all your contact information, making sure that if there's any way they want to reach out, maybe clarifying questions, that they have that. But yeah, I just really thank you so much for the time this morning and being able to have this conversation.
My pleasure, Nick. I've enjoyed it tremendously.
Awesome. Well, thanks again.